of course, there's many similarities, not only between the events of this weekend in Brazil and what happened in the US 2 years ago, but also in, the movements of former Presidents Donald Trump and former President Bolsonaro. But there is a stark difference here, and that is the events in the United States happened before the new government took office, whereas in Brazil, we have a new government that was sworn in over a week ago. And so it's institutionally a very different situation. Now, we do have a very fractured country. The question now is whether President Lula da Silva is able to deliver on his promise upon taking office that he would be able to unify Brazil. And the coming days and how he goes about reacting to the events of Sunday will be crucial in that respect.
Talk about former President Jair Bolsonaro's response, because so far he has not officially conceded defeat, but he did put out a comment yesterday saying peaceful demonstrations within the law are part of democracy, but depredations and invasions of public buildings like we saw today are not within the rules. What do you make of his response? And could we continue to expect this type of activity so long as he doesn't concede defeat?
Well, our expectation is that this will continue, and former President Bolsonaro's responses have been very tepid on purpose, not only after the electoral result, but yesterday as well. And he, during his 4 years in office, he was very careful to always, toe a fine line between remaining within constitutional and legal boundaries and pushing against those constitutional and legal boundaries. So, of course, he did some tepid condemnation of yesterday's events. However, he has fallen short of condemning the campouts that remain across the country outside military outposts demanding a coup and the forceful removal of the president. So again, it's, playing with that, remaining within the Constitution, yet his supporters are actually demanding to break with the democratic order and the Constitution of Brazil to reinstate him in office.
Well, on that note, I was going to ask what you think this movement's end game is. Is that the end game? That's what his supporters want.
Well, that's what they claim, and that's what they're calling for and have been calling since the election results. Now, if you ask me, it's quite ironic to be demanding to break with democracy to reinstate what they believe was a democratic outcome, because their argument at the core is that they believe the elections were fraudulent, that former President Bolsonaro indeed won the election, and that they're being denied a second Bolsonaro term against the will of the people. Yet, if we think about breaking with democratic order and what that means in Latin America, it potentially means that the protests they are carrying out would be completely banned and outlawed, right? Civil rights tend to be heavily restricted under military rule. Now, the main question is whether these camps will now be removed from outside military outposts by the Lula administration because of the threat they represent not only in Brasilia, but in other states where governors who have close links to Bolsonaro may be unwilling to respond with force like we saw in Brasilia yesterday, where the response was quite tepid until the intervention of the federal capital by the federal administration.